joining us now to talk a little bit more about the Eagles and where this team is under Howie Roseman. He's a columnist at the MMQB, the Business of Sports podcast, former Eagle front office executive, Green Bay Packers, Andrew Brandt. He joins us now at Andrew Brandt on Twitter. Welcome back, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing well. Always good to be with you.
Yes, and you just wrote recently about the praise of Howie Roseman and Doug Pederson. And, you know, I know we talk a lot about how this team has got here, but I want to get your take on how improbable many people around the league think this duo is in excelling the way that they are. I mean, Pederson, kind of an off-the-radar coach. I don't know that any other team had any interest in him, and maybe he was only given this job because of his ties to Andy Reid and his recommendation. And Roseman, who was pushed down the broom closet and basically thought to be dead in this league. How improbable is it that these two are standing at the top of the mountain right now?
Well, I think you sort of hit on it, where the expectations for everything around the Eagles were not great. And I don't know if there's any pundit out there that picked the Eagles to win the Super Bowl, let alone win the division with Carson Wentz. So it's really an amazing story that probably isn't even getting enough attention as it should, that we have a team in the Super Bowl that lost its starting Pro Bowl left tackle, its most versatile running back, its best linebacker, its best special teams player, and then, of course, the pied de resistance. They lost the guy who was going to be the MVP of the league and the quarterback. And they're in the Super Bowl. I mean, we're going to hear a lot of hosannas, we already have, to Tom Brady, to Bill Belichick and history and all these Super Bowls and blah, blah, blah. I get it. But I think it's going to be overshadowing what an incredible job both men have done, which I've written about. I've written about Howie's job, which the NFC Championship game was a highlight reel for Howie Roseman. I mean, look who made plays.
Unbelievable.
Patrick Robinson, Chris Long, Alshon Jeffrey, LeGarrette Blount, and Torrey Smith. I mean, most of those guys had touchdowns. He has extended Ertz and Lane Johnson. He has found Foles instead of what we'd be watching Chase Daniel right now. And, of course, he maneuvered to get this team in position to take Wentz, which is the franchise player for, who knows, 15 years to come. So it's an incredible job. And so even before I get to Doug, who is equally deserving of high praise, I think Howie should be recognized as, you know, not only executive of the year, but everything he's touched has turned to gold this year.
Yeah, you didn't mention Barnett, who they got with that pick, right. Got for the Bradford pick. Corey Graham, who also had an interception. You did mention right. Foles, who they signed, who had a pretty good game. They also brought in Darby, Ajayi. I mean, the list goes on of the guys that the Jernigan deal. How about that deal where, I mean, he just moved back in the third round to get a guy that really kind of completed that defensive front in the interior. I mean, a lot of people here, I think, you know, we did the show the other day, Andrew. We said, you can apologize. Can you suck it up and apologize? And, oh, he's not a football guy and this, and they've never done anything. There's so much gray area surrounding Howie Roseman. Is there gray area around him now? Is he the guy? Or, I mean, there's some people around here that say, I don't know, it's Howie. I think it's Joe Douglas that's making a lot of these decisions.
Yeah, I can say this, and I'm biased because, A, I've known Howie for 20 years. B, I was a consultant with the Eagles in 2009, 2010 when I left the Packers and moved back to Philly. My wife's from here, and I was brought in by Joe because Howie was moving from cap contracts to personnel. And I was going to take over the cap contracts till they brought in someone that was experienced that could do those. And I just saw Howie in studying personnel. It's not like he sat in the office and just he went out on the college campuses. He got into it. He studied. He became a scout. And this bias against, unless you're sort of bird dog players your whole life, you can't be a GM, to me is ludicrous. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned it. You mentioned Derek Barnett. That is where GMs like Howie really separate themselves. Your typical football guy scout GM is not going to squeeze the Vikings for a 1. They're going to say, we'll do it for a 3. He's going to say, maybe, but, can we get a 2? And it's just amazing that Howie has his relationship with Tannenbaum and moving up with those Dolphins trades like Ajayi and like Byron Marshall. I mean, those things have paid dividends.
There's no question about it that, a lot of these moves have been so savvy. And the fact of the matter is this, I wonder if Howie's sitting there this week and wondering how he's trying to improve the team for next year already, even as his team is in the Super Bowl. Like, these are the kind of decisions, I got Nick Foles playing this well. He's got to be putting scenarios in his head, right?
Well, I mean, in terms of protecting the team, I think the only free agents of note are like Nigel Bradham, who no one in the league likes more than Jim Schwartz likes him. And I don't even know. I mean, it's hard to even think about who they're going to lose. Now, yeah, maybe if they want to trade Foles, sure they can get a nice pick for him. But, yeah, I mean, this team is in great shape. They seem to be built for the short term with all these veterans, and the long term with their best player being whatever he is, 24, 25 years old, Ertz and Johnson and all these guys that are young. I mean, it's a good look right now.
You write about the kind of the unconventional way that he's done things, and all this stuff about how the Eagles were not really well thought of in the offseason. I mean, nobody, as you said, nobody really picked them to do all that much. So, what are a couple of the not Wentz move, but some of the team building moves that were criticized that have proven to kind of jump out and have this team here?
Well, I think, again, you go down the list, scrap heap guys like Patrick Robinson, LeGarrette Blount. Anyone could have had those guys. Anyone. Any team in the league could have had those guys. Chris Long maybe had a little more interest, but not a lot. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Jeffrey, I heard, had at least 3 or 4 teams. A couple wanted to do longer-term deals. Somehow they convinced him to roll the dice in Philly. And one of those teams was, as been reported, Minnesota, where it was kind of down to the Vikings and the Eagles. And, of course, that's turned out to pay huge dividends. And I just think Ajayi, again, taking advantage of the misfortune of others. That's what he did when Bridgewater went down. That's what he did when Ajayi pissed off the coaching staff in Miami. And it was just an amazing deal because now you got this guy basically for free. I don't know what he's going to make, $700,000 next year. And they can let Blount go if they want, or they can bring back Blount for cheap. They've got Corey Clement. I mean, it's just a nice situation to be in.
Andrew Brandt, you were in Green Bay when Doug Peterson was there. And, I mean, so you know what kind of guy this is. Is the fact that he has blossomed into a really, I know a lot of people think Belichick's number 1, and I'm not suggesting Doug's ahead, but I don't know that who people think is number 2. If Doug is able to pull this off, I guess he's got to be in that conversation as one of the best in the game at this stage of his career. Did you ever foresee this when you had him as a player in Green Bay?
He's an amazing guy in terms of, forget about all the X's and O's. He has an incredible nature, always upbeat, always resilient. It's been shown with these teams. Never get down, never woe is me about Wentz. And that was so evident right after the injury and all the way through. The guys have responded to that. He's not an ego guy. He's happy to let Schwartz run the defense. In my day, he was our backup for, 4 or 5 years I was there. And it's a funny story I tell, which is every offseason this is before Aaron, I would try to get a backup for Brett Favre, and I'd try Dilfer, and I'd try Chris Chandler, and I'd try Kerry Collins, and everyone would be like, no freaking way. I want to go to a place where there's a chance I can play. Because Brett never gets hurt. He never misses a snap. Never missed a snap when I was there.
Right.
So every April or May, I'd give a call to Louisiana. I'm like, Doug, can you come back? And Doug didn't care. Obviously, he knew he was down the list. But he did. He came back. We did our contract together. He never had an agent. He did over the phone 5 minutes. Huh. And he was Brett's best friend. He was Brett's golfing partner. He's the guy we reached when Brett's father died because we couldn't relocate Brett. We found Doug. Doug was with Brett. Doug was his coach on the field. It's just such a great influence, and we saw it. This guy's going to be a coach. And Andy, who he knew from the previous stint in Green Bay before he came to Philly, Andy brought him in, and the rest is history. But he's an incredible leader in not the sort of hard-nosed, loose Nick Saban, Bill Belichick leader, but in kind of the upbeat, optimal performance guy. So it really shows through.
Andrew Brandt, 53 men against 53 men. Whose roster do you like better?
Now you're going to start asking the questions where my bias comes out, obviously, because I like the two guys we're talking about. I like the team. Of course, Brady swings things their way, as he has done in Vegas. But I like the breadth of the team in Philly. But the fact we're talking about this with a backup quarterback is just amazing. I mean, isn't it? I mean, is there any team in the league we'd be talking like this about playing the Patriots with a backup quarterback?
Probably not.
It's not. Maybe Philadelphia if you have Bradford, but Minnesota. But you just can't even think of that.
I think in 2013, Nick Foles had the fairy tale. I don't know that it was ever finished. The period might get put at the end of the sentence now.
And I think you do have to give a little credit to Chip Kelly, because what's working for Foles, as everyone listening knows, is the mesh point, stick the ball in the running back's belly and pull it out. And that was Kelly. I mean, that was his thing. And Nick is really good at that. So I think some credit has to go there, too.
And I guess Doug and Frank and DiFilippo for acknowledging that and entering that into the playbook.
Absolutely. All those guys, look what they've done with Wentz and now Foles.
Andrew Brandt, MMQB, read the piece on Howie Roseman and Doug Pederson, and check him out at Andrew Brandt on Twitter. Thank you, pal.
Always good.